In the previous section, we explored defaults and terminations. What happens when the lease relationship breaks down? Now we turn to the legal framework that was designed to prevent those disputes in the first place: the Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, URLTA. This important model law standardizes the relationship between landlords and tenants, promotes fairness, and ensures habitability and accountability across residential leases in the United States. Arizona's own Residential Landlord and Tenant Act reflects many of these same principles and governs nearly all residential rental relationships in the state. Purpose and goals of URLTA. The Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, URLTA, was developed as a model law by the Uniform Law Commission to guide states in creating balanced, fair, and transparent landlord-tenant legislation. Before its adoption, residential leases often heavily favored landlords, leaving tenants without adequate protections or recourse. URLTA's main objectives are to equalize and standardize the rights and obligations of landlords and tenants, protect tenants from unethical or predatory leasing practices, simplify lease terms, and discourage unfair or overly complex provisions. A major impact of URLTA was empowering courts to invalidate unfair leases, particularly those granting excessive advantages to landlords or denying tenants basic rights, such as access, repairs, or habitability. Areas of regulation. Under URLTA addresses every major aspect of the leasing process, from lease creation to termination. Its areas of regulation include lease agreements, deposits, and advances. Obligations of landlords and tenants. Access to the premises, default, and eviction standards. These areas collectively ensure transparency, protect tenant rights, and establish guidelines for resolving disputes fairly. Lease agreements. URLTA encourages clear written leases and discourages vague or one-sided terms. The Act provides specific guidance in several key areas. Unclear lease term. If the lease duration is not stated, it defaults to a periodic tenancy, usually month to month. Rent amount. If rent is not clearly specified, courts may set rent at a fair market value. Waiver of rights. Landlords cannot persuade tenants to waive fundamental rights guaranteed under law, such as the right to a habitable dwelling or notice before entry. For example, a landlord cannot require a tenant to sign away the right to basic repairs or future court remedies. If such a waiver appears in a lease, it is legally unenforceable. Deposits and advances. URLTA places strict limits on how landlords handle security deposits and other prepayments. The maximum deposit a landlord can request cannot exceed 1.5 months' rent, excluding the first month's rent. Deposits must be kept separate from the landlord's personal or business funds. Tenants may be entitled to interest on their deposit, depending on state law. Any non-refundable fees must be labeled as such in writing. Otherwise, they are refundable. After move-out, landlords must return deposits and provide an itemized list of deductions within a legally specified period, in Arizona within 14 days, excluding weekends and legal holidays. If a landlord fails to return the deposit or provide proper documentation, the tenant may recover double the amount wrongfully withheld as damages. While URLTA governs landlords' behavior, state laws like Arizona's real estate statutes, ARS Section 322174 and Section 322175, also regulate how licensed brokers and property managers must handle tenant monies, requiring separate trust accounts and accurate record keeping. Landlord obligations. Under URLTA, landlords have broad duties to ensure safety, fairness, and habitability. These obligations include acting in good faith in all dealings with tenants, providing essential services, including water, heat, electricity, and air conditioning, maintaining the property in a fit and habitable condition, complying with all health and building codes, making necessary repairs, and keeping common areas safe, providing at least 48 hours notice before entry, except in emergencies, keeping accurate records of rent payments and deposits, delivering itemized deposit deductions and refunds within the legal time frame. If the landlord violates these duties, the tenant may seek damages, rent abatement, or even termination of the lease for material breaches. Tenant obligations under URLTA. Tenants also have clear responsibilities designed to maintain fairness and respect for the property and neighbors. These include acting in good faith with the landlord, paying rent on time and in full, keeping the premises clean and safe, avoiding damage, destruction, or misuse of the property, using the premises only for lawful, agreed-upon purposes. Respecting the peace and quiet of neighboring tenants. Failure to meet these obligations can result in eviction or other legal remedies by the landlord. Access and privacy rights. URLTA carefully balances the landlord's right of access with the tenant's right to quiet enjoyment. Landlords may enter the property to prevent damage or destruction, make necessary repairs or improvements, show the property to prospective tenants or buyers. However, landlords must give reasonable notice, typically 48 hours, and enter only at reasonable times. Tenants may refuse entry only if notice requirements are not met or if entry is unreasonable. Conversely, if a tenant unreasonably denies access, the landlord may pursue legal remedies for interference. Default and eviction procedures. URLTA standardizes the process for defaults and evictions to ensure fairness to both parties. If the landlord defaults, the tenant may terminate the lease after proper notice, sue for damages or rent abatement, deposit rent into court escrow pending resolution. If the tenant defaults, the landlord may serve proper notice to cure or vacate, file for eviction, forcible detainer, if the default is not cured, recover damages or unpaid rent through civil court. These procedures ensure that evictions are lawful, documented, and supported by due process rather than immediate self-help actions. Exemptions to URLTA. Certain occupancies are excluded from URLTA coverage, such as hotels and motels, transient occupancies. Cooperative housing under proprietary leases, residences under contract for deed, installment land contracts. These exceptions recognize different legal relationships and protect temporary or ownership-based arrangements from being treated as standard tenancies. Arizona's Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. Arizona's version of URLTA, found in ARS Title 33, Chapter 10, expands and localizes these protections. It governs all residential rentals, excluding dormitories, hotels, and public housing, and clearly defines each party's rights. Under Arizona law, landlords must disclose ownership and management information, provide a move-in inspection form, and maintain habitability. Tenants must keep the unit clean, follow building codes, and respect others' rights. Landlords may not retaliate against tenants by raising rent or reducing services. Tenants may use self-help remedies for minor defects up to $300 after proper notice. Both parties must act in good faith and may terminate the agreement for uncorrected material breaches. Arizona's act emphasizes fairness but views the landlord-tenant relationship as private, meaning most disputes are handled through civil court, not a state enforcement agency. Property management and licensing in Arizona. Arizona law requires most property managers to hold a real estate broker's license, except when managing a single property for one owner, short-term rentals, less than 30 days, or properties under common ownership. Licensed managers must comply with ADRE regulations for trust account handling, record-keeping, and disclosure obligations. Summary. The Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act and its Arizona counterpart provide a vital framework for fairness, habitability, and accountability in residential leasing. They set standards for clear leases, reasonable deposits, timely repairs, privacy, and equitable remedies for breach. For agents, understanding URLTA principles is essential when drafting leases, managing property, or advising clients on their rights and responsibilities. Discussion. Why did states adopt versions of the URLTA? To create consistency, fairness, and clear standards for residential leasing practices across jurisdictions. Why must landlords provide an itemized list of deductions when returning a deposit? Because it ensures transparency and prevents unlawful withholding of tenant funds, which could result in double damage penalties. What does the tenant's right to quiet enjoyment mean? It guarantees the tenant's peace, privacy, and undisturbed possession of the rental property, free from unreasonable landlord interference. How does Arizona's Residential Landlord and Tenant Act differ from URLTA? It localizes URLTA principles, adds state-specific provisions, like the $300 self-help repair limit, and treats disputes as private civil matters rather than administrative issues. Closing remarks. The Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act reshaped housing law nationwide by balancing the scales between landlords and tenants. Its Arizona adaptation ensures habitability, transparency, and fairness while respecting private property rights. For real estate professionals, knowledge of URLTA is crucial. It underpins ethical leasing, professional management, and effective conflict resolution in every residential transaction.